On the morning of March 14, 2019, a woman named Clara Whitfield sat on the cold tile floor of her bathroom in a small apartment in Queens, New York, pressing her phone against her ear. She was listening to a voicemail. She had listened to this same voicemail every single day for the past 11 months. It was from her 17-year-old son Ethan. And Ethan was no longer alive. The voicemail was only 9 seconds long. Just 9 seconds. But those 9 seconds were the only thing keeping Clara from completely falling apart. Because in those 9 seconds, Ethan said something that Clara didn't understand. Not when he first left it, and not in the 11 months since his death. But she would understand it. Eventually. And when she did, it would change everything. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where it all started. Clara and David Whitfield moved to New York City in the summer of 2001. They were both 23 years old, freshly married, and completely broke. David had gotten a job as a junior electrician with a construction company in Manhattan. Clara worked the register at a laundromat in Astoria. They lived in a studio apartment so small that the bed touched the kitchen counter. But they were happy. Genuinely, deeply happy. Their first son, Ethan, was born in November of 2001, just 2 months after the towers fell. Clara always said that Ethan was the light that came after the darkness. He came into the world screaming louder than any baby in the ward. And from that day on, he never stopped making noise. He was loud, energetic, stubborn, and full of life. 3 years later, their daughter Sophie was born. She was the opposite of Ethan, quiet, gentle, always watching the world with wide, careful eyes. Where Ethan would run into a room and knock things over, Sophie would sit in the corner and draw pictures of everyone around her. David worked long hours, 12-hour shifts, sometimes 6 days a week. He would come home smelling like sweat and metal, his hands rough and cracked. But every night, no matter how tired he was, he would sit on the edge of Ethan's bed and read him a story. Even when Ethan got older, 10, 12, 14, David still sat on the edge of that bed. They didn't read stories anymore. They just talked. About school, about life, about the Knicks, about everything and nothing. Clara used to stand in the hallway and listen. She never interrupted. That was their time. Things started to change in 2016. David's company lost a major contract, and half the crew got laid off. David was one of them. For a man who had worked every single day since he was 16 years old, unemployment felt like a death sentence. He didn't know who he was without work. He started drinking. Not a lot at first. A beer after dinner. Then 2. Then a 6-pack. Then something stronger. Within 6 months, David was a different person. He was angry. He was distant. He would sit in the living room in the dark, staring at the television without really watching it. Clara tried everything. She begged him to see a counselor. She hid the bottles. She cried. She screamed. Nothing worked. The worst part was what it did to the kids. Sophie, who was 12 at the time, became almost invisible. She stopped drawing. She stopped talking at dinner. She would go straight to her room after school and close the door. And Ethan got angry. He was 15 years old and watching his father fall apart. And he didn't have the emotional tools to process it. He started getting into fights at school. His grades dropped. He and David would get into screaming matches that shook the walls of their apartment. One night in January of 2017, David came home drunk and knocked over the kitchen table. Ethan stepped between David and Clara, looked his father straight in the eye, and said, "You're not my dad anymore." David didn't say a word. He just stood there, swaying slightly, his eyes glassy. Then he turned around, walked out the front door, and didn't come back for 3 days. When he did come back, he slept on the couch. And from that night on, something between David and Ethan was broken. They didn't sit on the bed together anymore. They didn't talk. They barely looked at each other. Clara felt like she was living in a house made of glass, and every day another crack appeared. In April of 2018, Ethan was 17. He had started hanging around with a group of older kids from the neighborhood. Clara didn't like them. She couldn't explain why. They were polite enough when they came to the door, but something about them felt wrong. A mother's instinct. She was right. Ethan started coming home late. Sometimes not until 2 or 3 in the morning. His eyes would be red. He would go straight to his room without speaking. Clara would knock on his door, and he would say, "I'm fine, Mom. Just tired." On the night of April 17, 2018, Clara was sitting in the kitchen waiting for Ethan to come home. It was almost midnight. Her phone buzzed. It was a voicemail from Ethan. She had missed his call by just 2 minutes. She had gone to the bathroom. She played the voicemail. Ethan's voice was strange. Not drunk, not high, but distant. Like he was calling from very far away. He said, "Hey Mom. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. And check the bottom drawer. Okay. I love you." 9 seconds. That was it. Clara called him back immediately. No answer. She called again. No answer. She sent a text. Nothing. At 1:47 a.m., there was a knock on the door. Clara opened it and saw 2 police officers standing in the hallway. She knew before they said a single word. She knew the way you know when the air suddenly gets heavy and the world tilts slightly on its axis. Ethan had been in a car with 3 other boys. The driver, an 18-year-old named Marcus, ran a red light at the intersection of Northern Boulevard and 48th Street. A delivery truck hit the passenger side at 40 miles an hour. Ethan was sitting in the passenger seat.
Perimeter secure. Check for passengers. Vital stable. Moving to transport. Copy. Traffic control incoming.
He was pronounced dead at Elmhurst Hospital at 1:12 a.m. He was 17 years old. What followed was the kind of grief that doesn't have a name. Clara stopped going to work. She stopped eating. She would sit on Ethan's bed for hours, holding his pillow against her chest, breathing in the fading scent of him. She played that voicemail over and over and over again. "Hey Mom. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. And check the bottom drawer. Okay. I love you." But here's the thing. Clara never checked the bottom drawer. She couldn't bring herself to do it. She was terrified of what she might find. What if it was drugs? What if it was something that would change the way she remembered her son? She couldn't risk it. So she left the drawer closed. And every day, she listened to his voice telling her to open it, and every day she didn't. David's reaction was different. The night they got the news, David locked himself in the bathroom for 4 hours. When he came out, his eyes were swollen shut from crying, but he never cried in front of anyone again. He went silent. Completely, totally silent. He stopped drinking, not because he found strength, but because he didn't have the energy for anything anymore. He moved through the apartment like a ghost. Sophie, now 14, became the invisible glue holding the family together. She was the one who made sure there was food in the fridge. She was the one who reminded Clara to take her medication. She was the one who knocked on David's door and told him dinner was ready, even when he didn't come out. But inside, Sophie was drowning. She had lost her brother. She had essentially lost both her parents. And nobody was asking her if she was okay. Nobody. 11 months passed. Clara had lost 22 pounds. David had started working again. Small electrical jobs, cash under the table. But he and Clara barely spoke. They existed in the same apartment, but they lived in different worlds. The marriage was dying. Everyone could see it. On March 14, 2019, exactly 11 months after Ethan's death, Clara was sitting on the bathroom floor, listening to the voicemail, when Sophie knocked on the door. "Mom. Not now, sweetheart. Mom, please. I need to talk to you." Something in Sophie's voice made Clara get up and open the door. Sophie was standing there holding a piece of paper. Her hands were shaking. "I opened the drawer," Sophie said. Clara's heart stopped. "What?" "Ethan's bottom drawer. I opened it." "I'm sorry, Mom, I know you. What was in it?" Clara's voice was barely a whisper. Sophie handed her the piece of paper. It was a letter, handwritten in Ethan's messy, slanted handwriting. Clara sat down on the edge of the bathtub and started reading. "Mom, if you're reading this, it means I finally got the guts to tell you. Or it means something happened, and you found it on your own. Either way, I need you to know some things. I'm sorry about the past year. I know I've been a mess. I know I've scared you. I want you to know that I'm not on drugs. I know that's what you think. I'm not. The reason I've been going out at night is because I've been working. Marcus's uncle owns a cleaning company, and they do office buildings in Manhattan after hours. It's not legal because I'm not 18 yet, and they pay cash, so I didn't want to tell you because I knew you'd make me stop. I've saved up for $200. The money is in an envelope under the letter. It's for Sophie. I heard her crying in her room last week, and when I asked her what was wrong, she told me that her art teacher said she's one of the most talented students she's ever had, and that there's a summer art program at Pratt Institute that could help her build a portfolio for college. But it costs $4,000, and Sophie said she would never ask you and Dad for that kind of money because she knows things are hard right now. Mom, Sophie is special. You know that. She's better than all of us. She doesn't complain. She doesn't ask for anything. She just quietly makes everyone's life better and never expects anything in return. I want her to have this. I want her to go to that program. I want her to be the artist she's supposed to be. And Mom, one more thing. Please don't give up on Dad. I know I said he's not my dad anymore. I didn't mean it. I was angry. He's still in there. The dad who used to sit on my bed and read me stories. He's still in there somewhere. Don't let him disappear. I love you. I love Sophie. I love Dad. Ethan. Clara couldn't breathe. She read the letter 3 times. Then she looked up at Sophie, who was standing in the doorway crying silently, and Clara realized something that hit her like a freight train. Her son had not been lost. Her son had not been running with the bad crowd. Her son had been quietly, secretly working to give his little sister a dream. Every night he came home with red eyes. It wasn't because of drugs. It was because he'd been cleaning office floors in Manhattan until 2 a.m. He was 17 years old, and he was trying to hold his family together in the only way he knew how. And nobody knew, because he never said a word. Clara pulled Sophie into her arms and they sat on the bathroom floor and cried together for a long time. Not the quiet, controlled crying that had become normal in their apartment, but the raw, ugly, gasping kind of crying that shakes your whole body and leaves you empty. When David came home that evening, Clara was sitting at the kitchen table with the letter and the envelope of cash in front of her. David looked at her face and froze. What happened? Clara handed him the letter. David read it standing up, leaning against the kitchen counter. Halfway through, his legs gave out and he slid down to the floor. He pressed the letter against his forehead and made a sound that Clara had never heard before. Something between a moan and a whisper, like his soul was tearing in half. Don't let him disappear, David read out loud, his voice breaking on every word. He's still in there. For the first time in 11 months, David looked at Clara. Really looked at her. And Clara looked back. And in that look was everything. The grief, the guilt, the years of silence, the love that had been buried under all of it. I'm still here, David said. I'm still here, Clara. Clara knelt down on the floor beside him and put her arms around him. And they held each other the way they hadn't held each other in years. Sophie enrolled in the summer art program at Pratt Institute that June. She used every dollar Ethan had saved. On the first day of the program, Clara pinned a small photo of Ethan inside Sophie's sketchbook. Sophie carried that sketchbook with her everywhere. David started attending AA meetings at a church in Jackson Heights. He went every Tuesday and Thursday night. He didn't talk for the first 3 meetings. On the 4th meeting, he stood up and said, "My son saved my daughter's future while I was too drunk to notice. I owe it to him to become the man he believed I still was." Clara went back to work. She got a job at a daycare center in Astoria. She liked being around children. Their noise, their chaos, their complete inability to be anything other than alive. It reminded her of Ethan when he was small. The apartment was still quiet sometimes. There were still nights when Clara played the voicemail and cried. There were still mornings when David sat on the edge of Ethan's bed and stared at the wall. There were still moments when Sophie would be drawing and suddenly stop, her pencil frozen in midair, lost in a memory of her brother. But they were together. That was the difference. They were broken, but they were together. In August of 2020, Sophie submitted her portfolio to the Rhode Island School of Design. She was accepted with a partial scholarship. On the day she got the acceptance letter, she sat down at the kitchen table and wrote a letter of her own. She addressed it to Ethan. She wrote, "I'm going, Ethan. I'm going because of you. And I promise I'll make it worth it. Every painting, every drawing, every single thing I create for the rest of my life. It's yours. It's all yours." She folded the letter, put it in the bottom drawer of Ethan's dresser, and closed it. Some stories don't have happy endings. This one doesn't either, not really. A 17-year-old boy is still gone. A family still has a hole in it that will never be filled. A mother still listens to a 9-second voicemail every single night before she goes to sleep. But sometimes, the people we lose leave behind more than grief. Sometimes they leave behind a letter in a bottom drawer that saves the people they loved. Sometimes the dead take care of the living in ways the living never expected. Ethan Whitfield never got to see his sister become an artist. He never got to see his father get sober. He never got to see his mother smile again. But he made all of it possible. And if that's not love, I don't know what is.